Norse in Wonderland, when nothing's as it seems. Norse in Wonderland, the truth will haunt your dreams. Norse in Wonderland, when nothing's as it seems. Norse in Wonderland, the truth will haunt your dreams.
In part 1, we looked at the footage. In part 2, we unraveled the questions and the cues. Though we missed one, because there was also a dude in a baseball hat that was doing weird hand signals to somebody while also recording. It was weird. In part 3, we zoomed out to the stage being set. And now, in part 4, the perfect shooter has arrived. Funny how these assassinations always end up with the same kind of character, isn't it? A face young enough to plaster across the news, a backstory neat enough to fit in a press release, and evidence that always appears right on time. They're not just solving the case, they're casting it. Because when the script calls for a villain, the system always seems to find the perfect one. And honestly, if the government's casting department ever goes broke, Netflix should hire them. They're experts at producing the exact archetype you didn't know you needed to hate. They claim they found the shooter, 22 years old, which is hilarious because at 22, most people can barely figure out their Wi-Fi password, let alone execute a flawless political hit. A Mauser rifle, inscriptions on bullet casings. It's almost poetic. And you know what happens when the government gets poetic? Somebody ends up dead. And the cherry on top, they say the evidence is airtight, which in government terms usually means it's duct tape, wishful thinking, and a guy in a back room saying, yeah, that looks about right. The name is Tyler Robinson, 22 years old, Utah local, and according to officials, he's now the one who pulled the trigger. The weapon, a Mauser bolt-action rifle, old school, precise, symbolic. Conveniently recovered, of course, complete with inscriptions on the bullet casings. Also, something I want to point to, people are saying that his dad turned him in, but they were already threatening the death penalty of the shooter. What parent would turn their child into the cops knowing that their child would probably be executed? I'm just trying to be realistic here, because we're like, oh, I would do the right thing. Would you, though? Would you? Would you send your child off to slaughter? I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying I don't think that's a realistic expectation of a parent. Which also makes it even weirder to me, but the story writes itself. A disaffected young man, politically motivated, leaving behind theatrical traces. In other words, the perfect shooter. But when the story is too perfect, that's when you need to ask yourself, who is holding the pen? Authorities say they've got the goods. The rifle recovered, casings inscribed with messages, which is also weird to me. Clothing and footwear allegedly matching surveillance, prints tying him to the scene. It's airtight, almost too airtight. Compare that to George Zinn, the 71-year-old distraction paraded around in cuffs. First, the bumbling old man with a limp and a suspicious email. Now, the sharp young shooter with all the trimmings. The contrast couldn't be more obvious. Act 1, confusion. Act 2, the villain reveal. And then there's the weapon itself. Officials say Robinson used a Mauser bolt-action rifle. Now, here's where history starts rhyming. When JFK was assassinated in 1963, early police reports described the rifle recovered in the Texas School Book Depository as a 7.65 millimeter Mauser. That detail made the news, until suddenly the story shifted. The official record became a 6.5 millimeter Carcano. But the Mauser sighting never disappeared. It lingered as a crack in the narrative. Go further. Intelligence operations across Europe and Latin America, Gladio hits, Phoenix program ops, Mauser rifles pop up again and again. They're reliable, precise, cheap, and globally accessible through surplus channels. Perfect for the lone gunman myth. Notice the pattern. Bolt-action rifles keep getting tied to high-profile hits. They're outdated in modern warfare, but perfect for staging theater. They let the assassin be framed as a skilled marksman rather than part of a coordinated squad. So when you hear Mauser today, you're not just hearing a weapon, you're hearing an echo, a callback to the JFK files, a reminder that the mythology of the lone shooter has always been armed with the same script. and sometimes the same rifle. This isn't about Robinson as a person. This is about the archetype he's being molded into. Think about it. Young, politically charged, allegedly radicalized, a weapon of symbolic weight, conveniently theatrical evidence, inscriptions, messages, statements, a lot of which I personally feel is difficult to prove because anything done on the internet can be faked. I'm just saying. It's so easy to get into somebody's social media and post things as them or to create and backdate posts, I'm sure. There are so many things that you can do with tech. That stuff carries almost no weight with me. The checklist of the perfect shooter gets ticked off one by one, and the media eats it up because it's a script they've seen before. Every era gets its villain. Every crisis gets its patsy. Here's what nobody in the press will say out loud. A 22-year-old is the easiest archetype to work with, and in my opinion, they're still technically a child. The brain isn't even fully developed yet. Emotional regulation, critical thinking, impulse control, those are still forming, which makes someone that age not only impressionable, but programmable. And vulnerable, just in general. So what does that mean here? It means Robinson could serve one of two roles. The scapegoat, an easy face to pin the crime on, whether he was even capable of pulling it off. The puppet, someone coerced, tricked, or psychologically manipulated into playing the part, using methods our government has already experimented with for decades. MKUltra wasn't just drugs and hypnosis. It was about pushing people past their limits, fracturing their identity, and steering their actions. A 22-year-old fits that mold perfectly. Whether he pulled the trigger or not, he's still the perfect candidate for someone else's script. So what happens when the narrative shifts from a messy old man in cuffs to a picture-perfect 22-year-old shooter? It resets the public imagination. Zinn fades out, Robinson takes center stage. And with him, the story gets tighter, neater, and easier to weaponize. The earlier questions, the Israel probe, the gun queue, the jet slipping off radar, all of that gets washed away under the headline, shooter identified. But just because the narrative tightens doesn't mean the truth does. In fact, it's the opposite. The neater the bow, the more you should look at the box. Why do political assassinations always end with a perfectly packaged shooter? Why was Zinn paraded first if Robinson was always the real suspect? Why does the same type of weapon echo across decades of lone gunman stories? How does the sudden neatness of the evidence make the messy cues we saw at the event disappear from coverage? And most of all, is Robinson a lone gunman or just the latest pawn in a much bigger script? The script is evolving, the actors are changing, but the stage directions remain the same. We live in the gap between what's seen and what's said. I stand rooted in truth, courage, and protection of the innocent. I choose awareness over ignorance. I speak what must be spoken even when the world is silent. And if anything ever happens to me, it's more than a convenient accident. I didn't do it to myself. I'm happy, healthy, and cautious. Something to think about before we end this. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Because just let's think about this. If there was a professional hit and this kid is not the shooter, but he is being scapegoated as the shooter, are they just gonna sit there and have a trial and then he's gonna get sent somewhere to live his life elsewhere because the government basically paid him off or did something to bribe him to be the face of this crime just so it can be closed, so it can be done with and people can stop talking about it, so it doesn't become the next Epstein files? Or are they gonna honestly publicly execute a potentially innocent 22-year-old kid? It'll be really interesting to see where this goes. That's all I'm saying. Because there's no way for us to really get true closure in this unless they are actually going to publicly execute him. Which I don't agree with that either, but I'm just saying, like, there will never be any way to prove that they ever followed through with anything that they say they're going to do with him unless we all actually witness it. So But most people don't require that level of transparency, I guess. And I'm not condoning it either. Sorry for this end rant, but I don't want to see him executed. I don't think that he is even capable of making any kind of decision. It's sad, that's all. But anyway, stay safe out there.
Chasing the rabbit, down we must go. Where does it end? Nobody knows. Hurry up now, we're running out of time. You better keep up or get left behind. Norse in Wonderland, where nothing's